Well, we got a request about a request. In Quick Tip 568, Air in Shadows. If you saw that one, you remember I wasn't quite sure what the person was asking, so I sort of guessed at it. Well, I guessed wrong. So here's the person, same person, thanked us for that, but says it's not what she meant. And then I always say she or he, this person meant, because I can't really tell. Anyway, not that that matters. Um, it goes like this. I keep hearing other painters say, let the shadows breathe, or put air in them, and shadows should be more transparent. Oh, that's what she says. All other people say that. Anyway, so she asked, I'm not sure how to do that. Well, if that's what they wanted you to do, they should have shown you how to do it. If you're ready for a rant, you might hear one. Well, those of us who teach sometimes get a little carried away with ourselves, and we throw stuff at you that has no meaning to you, and then we don't show you what we're talking about. Well, I really don't have any patience with that. If a painter says to you that your shadows ought to breathe, then they need to show you how to make them breathe. That's what I'm going to try to show you about what I think they mean by that. The other question the person asked within that also was about how to make shadows transparent a la prima. And of course, the assumption is you have to glaze. Well, no, I will put all that together in this one little demonstration I want to do for you. All right, so breathing. All in the world, I think a person is talking about, or a teacher or a painter or whatever, who says that all in the world they're talking about is to allow the shadows to have edges that merge into the edges around it, and shadows where you can see through the shadow into the surface that the shadow has been cast upon. But we're talking about cast shadows. Now I have pictures here, have this picture here that I pulled from Pixabay. Gives a pretty good shadow, I think. Then I've enlarged it here because I'm just going to show you this part right here. I may show you that. I'll get to that in just a moment. So, first of all, it's not just shadow. There are three distinct kinds of shadows. There's the cast shadow, which is what I think these people are talking about. But then there's the form shadow, and that is a shadow that is showing the form or the shape of an image. But then there's also the occlusion shadow, and that's the shadow that's in those spaces where the light's been squeezed away, where you really can't see, like where a foot is touching. You can't really see it really good in these pictures. I don't show it. But when we see a foot touching the surface or all kinds of things where things are touching each other, that little space where they're touching has the light squeezed out. And that's called an occlusion shadow, Occlusion, or something like that. So, and the reason it's called that, or the reason we need to be aware of it, is because if you don't put that occlusion shadow in there, it looks like your images are floating. And so, but that's not what this person asked about. I just wanted to clarify. There are more kinds of shadows than just the cast shadow. So we're going to talk about cast shadows, and this is cast shadow, and this is the extension of it. You can see what I've done right here. I've cut this part right here and enlarged it here so that you can see what I'm going to be talking about. And of course, this part right under here. Well, the length of the quick tips don't allow us to do a complete painting. We don't really need to. So I want to show you. Now, when you're looking at shadow and trying to decide what to do with it, don't think in terms of you got to make it breathe, or don't even think in terms of transparent. Focus your attention on what the colors and the values are doing first. What are the colors doing and what are the values doing? And how do I answer that question? Colors can do, broadly, colors can do two things other than describe. Colors do describe, but within that description, colors can gradate into other colors, or a color can gradate into another version of itself. And colors can contrast. And values can do the same thing. Values, that's what they do. Values can gradate, dark moving gradually to light, meaning you can't tell where one value ends and the other begins because they're blended. Gradated means technically blending. Now you can see in this cast shadow and in this cast shadow, the edges of those shadows are blending into the edges of the areas that are hit by light. And that's what we need to be able to observe and learn the technique for how to do that. So I want to very quickly here throw a little demonstration for you. Now, I always like to get the palette set up with the colors I know are going to give me what I'm looking at. And I have a specific way I do that, and you can look it up on our channel page. I call it a value line. I will create a line on the palette for each color I'm going to be using, not each color I see. Each color I'm going to be using, and the value line goes from the darkest dark to the lightest light. Sometimes I set up 3 values, and sometimes I set up 5. And years ago, I used to just make it grade 8, make all of them grade 8 right across. But this is kind of a shortcut. So for this one, I've got the darkest dark here, and I've got the middle value here. So now what that means is all these areas in shadow, I will be mixing from this middle value to the dark value to get those. I won't be going any lighter within the areas in shadow. And all the areas that are not in shadow, being hit by light, I'll be working on this side with this line of colors and white. Now usually I'll put a lighter version here, but it works just as well to do it either way. Now, so I like to start in the shadow area. And in this case, what I'm seeing right in here in terms of value, I'm seeing a value that is probably about right in there. It's a shadow value. And right up in here, this whole, if I squint at it, I see it generally, first of all, it's kind of a middle distance, middle value. You would call it a moderate shadow value. And that's the one I'm going to start with rather than the darkest dark that I see. So I think I'll work right up in here because we have this gradation that goes out like that. So to do that, the reason I have these colors here is because I'm identifying this as yellow-green. I'm identifying this as blue-green. Those are the 2 hues I see. And so in order to have the yellow-green, I have the yellow here. And then to have the blue-green, I have the blue here that I can mix into that. And this will get somewhat desaturated, and I will use this to desaturate. Yellow-green, red-violet. Yellow, green, and red, violet are complementary colors. And we can see that. I'll put this right up here. You can see it. Red, violet, and yellow, green are complementary colors. That means that they will desaturate each other. And then we can see on the color wheel that the blue is going to give us, so there's the yellow, green, there's the green, and there's the blue. We're moving like this. Adding blue and yellow, green, we're going to get blue, green if we add enough. So that's the reason the blue's there, and then I put some yellow out on the palette if I need to get that yellow, green, more yellow. And there's white, of course, to give me the white. So that's my setup to do this exercise. Now, the first thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to pull this middle value yellow, green out, and I'm going to pull this dark value of yellow, green. By the way, you're going to want to know what tube colors I'm using. I just hear that coming. The yellow, green is sap green. Daniel Smith sap green, or you could use Rembrandt sap green if you can't find that. The red violet is the Gamblin quinacridone violet, and the blue is ultramarine blue. Now, got that out of the way. I think it works better. I know it works better if you work with color in terms of the hue you're working with rather than the tube color, but we'll go, that's for another, in fact, there are other quick tips that talk about that. Here we go. Oh, and I want to pull, for this, I want to pull a little bit of this blue out. Let's make a value line of that blue. Let's go from the darkest dark to the middle value right here of that blue, or somewhere in that range. And I'm going to pull a little bit of this out, and this get this going, just a little bit of that, because I don't need that. This red violet is very, 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 very strong in tinting strength, so I have to be, not will need very much. I'm not going to pull much out. Here we go. So I need this blue-green to start with, and I needed the value that I'm seeing right there. If it could be, you might call that on the value scale, maybe about value 6, 6.5, 7. I'd rather just think of it as shallow value, or shallow to moderate. So that's, first of all, I'm going to load my brush here, and I'm going to check the value and squint. Okay, that is very much in that range. I'm going to put a little bit of the blue into that, in the same value range as I used for the yellow green. Now let's check that out. So let's get very, very close. I'm very, very close there. And I probably need to desaturate that just a hair. So I'll just reach for a tiny bit of that red violet and put it in here. I don't need that thoroughly mixed. Okay, I think that might give me, let's just see, yes. Maybe a little bit bluer. Now that is not solid blue all the way across here. All right, I've got to nail it now. Which one of this am I going to work with? I'm going to refer to this one. I think I'm going to work with this one because, as I said before, we do have that taper there. All right, so I'm just going to lay that in. That is in a block in. You might call it a block in. I'm just going to, and I call it a block in when I lay paint on the canvas in oil, or the same thing is true if you're working in acrylic. It's a little different in watercolor. But the block in is just laying the color and the value on the canvas, nothing else. It's not trying to shape the thing. So I just want to get that. I just want to get that indicated right here on the canvas, and let it taper out right there just a little bit. And I'm gonna rinse the brush, and I want to get the light around it, where the light grass is around it. I want to get that indicated. All right, now, so what do we have there? We have something different. So I'll go on this side. This is middle value. This is transition value. Middle value is the transition between where light hits and areas that go into shadow. And if you think about it like that, think about it as transition, then you realize that you don't want your lights to be any darker than this. Anything that's in light, you don't want your shadow areas to be any lighter than that. And if you work at it from that viewpoint, it's surprising how accurate you'll be. All right, so I'm going to get a value line built towards the light here, and I am pretty much on the money there, value-wise. That photograph is showing that grass a little bit cooler than I see it, but I think I'm going to stick with that, and load the brush. And remember, the purpose of the block in is simply placement. That's all, placement. So I'm not ready to start defining the shadow yet. So if you will take an approach like this, I'm not saying work like me. I'm just saying I know this works. Now I'm going to start doing some slight blending. You see there between those edges of the shadow and the light. And that is one thing that you can do to make your shadows feel like they're, quote, breathing, unquote. So get that blend so that the edge of the shadow is soft. Now I'll do the same thing. I've got to wipe the brush out really, really good. I'm going to come now on the other side and just set that stage for you over here. Now that one is definitely cooler. And a little cooler there, so I think this time I'm going to add just a tiny bit of cool to that. It doesn't need to be desaturated. It's already desaturated enough, sap green. is already a slightly desaturated yellow-green. Okay, let's just check that out. And just a little bit of cool in there. And I'm not going to mix it thoroughly. All right, now I'm just going to put that in and just scrub that in just like I did the top one. I'm going to move right over in here like that. Pull that brush out and just set that environment for you, for that, for where the light is shining on that grass. All right, so now this is the way I set up something like that. It makes it so much easier to work with if you set it up in kind of, especially, as I said before, especially if you're working in oils or acrylics. And if you're doing more or less realistic painting in expressionistic mode, it doesn't matter what, but you want your image to pretty much reflect the image that you're interpreting. If you set it up like this and not try to just dive into it from the start, that gives you a foundation to work with. Now, I really usually like to start with a No 10, but I skipped that this time, but in sake of time. All right, now, watch what happens here. Now I'm going to just use a very light touch of a brush that I have pulled the paint out of and blend those shadows, blend the light, blend the light into the shadow, just with that kind of motion. Now let's give it a little bit of just barely having the brush barely touch it there. Now, I'm going to go back now into the shadow area itself. If you will look, and what you see in there, you see some little bits of grass blade shadow. Some are occlusion shadows coming through those grass blades just a little bit here. You can see it here even better. You see that? And so what I want to do now is I'm going to move back into the dark. This is the darkest dark as it comes out of the tube is where we start with getting an occlusion shadow. Now, let's see what we can do there. I'm going to pull this down just a little bit here. Pull all the paint out of the brush. I won't rinse it, just pull the paint out of the brush. All right, now, I'm going to load just a little bit the tip of that brush with this darkest dark. And then I'm going to go back into the blue and do the same thing. Now, I'm going to go back into the darkest dark of the red violet and add just enough to take away the hue of the green, because we don't see any hue in occlusion shadows. All right, I think that probably does it. If you look at it, see how gray that turns. Let's see what it does when I heat it there. Not quite enough. Being a little bit stingy with the quantity of paint I'm putting on the end of the brush. Let's try that just a little bit. There we go. Okay, now let's see if I can make that work. All right, so I just want to put, there we go, right there. There's your occlusion shadow blocked in, right there. All right. Now, for the next part, I'm going to switch to the fan brush. You could use, I could have used that's my rosemary brush I had there. What is that? I always have to look at the number on the brush, 274, I believe it is. Yes. Anyway, but I'm going to go to the fan brush because I want to emphasize what can happen here. Now, what you're seeing here is you're seeing shadow bits moving up into the light. You see that right there? And you see a little bit of that right there. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'm doing this like this with my brush because that's the direction in which I see those dark shadow areas moving. See the same thing right here? And so what I'll do is in the paint I already have there, I'm just going to take just the tip of my fan brush. I'm going to give it a flip, just like that. Flip it sort of up, just like that. And that will give that, there we go. That will give that impression of grasses moving. Now I'm going to move the fan brush. Now I'm going to move the fan brush back into the middle value. And we're going to overlap some strokes. And there again, I don't want much paint on it. I'm just going to hit it just very slightly in that shadow area. Hit it very slightly. And as I hit it and add that middle value green over that, you begin to see the transparency of it. And now I'm going to do that. And see, yes, okay. Let's do just a little bit more of that. Just pull that out, and I'm going to let that fade a little bit more as it goes into the distance. So to do that, I'll go on the light side of the shadow and just let that fade just a little bit more here. And then I'll push it up like that with that blending stroke. Just let that, there we go. That's beginning to do what I wanted it to do. And you see that beginning to fade out. I'm going to move back to my other brush for the moment now. And we're going to move back into the light side. And let's see what we see there. I'll get to pick up just a little bit more light there on that light side. And I'm going to hit it here, and I'm going to stroke downwards from the light there. Just a little bit, not much. Just have a little bit of that light on there. There it comes. Stroke downwards. So, and I'm not going to try to do any more in the light areas. That breathing shadow I wanted to show you. Yeah, I know. So, whoever has been saying that kind of thing is probably going to get PO'd at me. I don't care. I'm used to being PO'd at. All right, so you see, now it's getting fixy. We don't want that. Don't want to overdo, and I slightly did overdo. So let's get rid of, blend some of that stuff out. I just use this back and forth horizontal movement of the brush, barely touching it to blend that stuff out. Now that is, okay, that's doing more like what I wanted to. Okay, in the front. Now in the front, where the, by the way, this kind of thing where you vary the value very slightly of on the shadow side, so you'll have a maybe 1 or 2 value difference between the the lightest light in the shadow and the darkest dark. That kind of variation is going to show the transparency that you're talking about, that you can do alla prima, just like I'm doing right now. So we're just going to do a couple of other things, and that is, I want to pull this down, the middle value part right here. I'll pull that out so I can have a flat area of paint, and then be sure the brush is good and dry. Going back with fan brush here, and I'm just going to just touch the tip of the bristles in that middle value green. And we're going to do this. Just going to do this. We'll put a few little shadow areas here in the light. Just do that. Because this light, this middle value on top of this dark, will translate as exactly what you're seeing, the transparency that you're seeing in the grass. Now let's see. Okay, we don't want that to be too fixy either. I'm going to turn it on its point right here now and give it some. I think I'll go to the other brush for that. Give that final. Going to go over here where it's picking up where these you can see it down here too. Those blades of grass are picking up more light. Just going to barely touch it here. Just spread those out. Spread those bristles out, and let's just give it a. Well, didn't even touch it. Give it a quick stroke. There we go. Another quick stroke. There we go. That's a little fixy. But let's get just a little bit more. A little bit more. This is just light. Nothing in the world, but just a little bit of light that we're seeing. That in front of that shadow, that cast shadow, that enables us to see it better. And I'm going to I'll work the light in front just a little bit for you. And you can see what I'm doing there. So the key is to discern your values, discern the values that you're working with. Start with the darkest and then lay the sequential, or the sequence is to lay the values that are lighter but in the shadow range over just areas of the darker value with strokes of the brush that indicate the movement of grass. So see, I just tried to describe there to you the colors, the values, what the colors are doing, what the values are doing, and technically how you can make that happen. But you can get variations. You can find probably some of your own ways of making that work. So I'll just leave it there. That's the basic idea of how you would make shadows breathe or make them more transparent. So give it a try and let me know what you think. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.